Alright, let's go ahead and get started on the reassembly of this iPad mini. We have our new battery here. We're going to go ahead and just rip off the adhesive strips on the back side to reveal the adhesive lines. If I can get this piece off here. Let's go ahead and take this and lay it down onto the interior portion of the device. The adhesive that was on there wasn't very sticky, so I'm going to go ahead and lay down some new adhesive on the back side of this to make sure the battery doesn't flop around. We don't want it hitting the back of the LCD and causing any distortion or spots. Just going to use some double-sided 3M tape. Normal tape you use for LCD repair on cell phones. Just two lines right next to the original adhesive will work just fine. Let's go ahead and peel the backing off of that. Sometimes this doesn't want to play fair, so let's use our little tweezers here real quick and pull the backing off. Alright, with that done, we can go ahead and just insert our battery. We're just going to line it up down here at the bottom. And an easy way to make sure that you have it lined up is you can just go ahead and plug the battery in if you want to make sure it'll fit into the connector, but normally it's a pretty tight, snug fit, so you can't really get it too wrong. So go ahead and press in the middle, make sure the adhesive is stuck down nice and tight. Go ahead and lay down our adhesive strip across the top. We'll make sure that all the edges are formed straight. We don't want deformed edges sticking up, creating a white spot on the back of our LCD. A little ridge here. I'm just going to use a flat tool to go ahead and flatten that back out. See, there's a bump here as well, so do the same thing. Sometimes it can get a little deformed in shipping. Alright, so we have our LCD and our glass piece here from the removal. We're going to go ahead and just re-adhere the LCD piece down. What we're going to do is we're just going to test it real fast and make sure that it's going to function properly for us before we start re-adhering and putting all the effort into applying this back to the chassis here. Sometimes these little flex connectors may be a little bit tricky. Don't put a lot of force trying to press them into place. You will damage them. Just give it a nice firm pressure until it clicks into place. Sometimes you'll have to mess with it a little bit, look and see exactly where the connector's at. Go ahead and push down on our battery connector here. Let's go ahead and flip over our display. Go ahead and see if it'll power on for us. Perfect. We do have our Apple logo. Just going to put the glass over on top. Give it a few seconds to load. Alright, so definitely the battery was the issue. You can see that we have fixed the issue and that it is booting up to this lock screen here, which is perfect for us. It's responding to touch. That means we can go ahead and proceed with the remaining portion of our reassembly. Now that we've tested it, what we're going to do is lay down new adhesive onto the mid-frame of the device. We want to make sure that we get a nice good seal all the way around. Now a lot of the time these will come with their own pre-cut adhesive. I'm not a big fan of that adhesive. It doesn't seem to work that great. So we're going to go ahead and remove everything on here and lay down some new 3M double-sided tape adhesive. So we want to keep these little pieces, metal pieces here, these little magnets. I figure everything's put in here for a reason. So we'll try to reassemble it as correct as possible. Here's that little magnet piece here. You should have 2 of them. Go ahead and peel up the adhesive across the bottom of the device. Now you want to be careful if you're peeling up adhesive near the home button area. Make sure you're careful of the 2 antennas that are down there, the Wi-Fi antennas. Make sure there's no broken glass, no residue. If you are using your old display, the old piece of glass, you can go ahead and just make sure you clean this off as well. We don't want any residue on this. I'm using a fairly sharp tool. If you ding the black backing when you're peeling up, you can just use a Sharpie to kind of cover it up when you reassemble it. Just peeling the adhesive off. It was on the front of the glass. Alright, looks pretty good. It's a little bit more here to go at the bottom that I'm peeling off. The reason why this is so important is you don't want to leave any high spots in the display where the glass would pull off, possibly start to pull away from the midframe. If you can get all the adhesive off, any glass residue, anything on there, it'll sit nice and flat and it'll look like it was put on by the factory. Little piece fell in here, just going to pull it out. Check the sides, make sure everything's nice and clean. Alright, so we do have our roll of 3M double-sided tape here. We're going to use 2 different types. We're going to use I think it's a 2mm or a 3mm, and then a 5mm in width. I'm going to put the thinner down the sides, and then the thicker across the top and the bottom. start down the side of the device. We'll go ahead and cut this to fit. It's going to use our dental pick here to make sure it's lined up right next to the interior portion of the bezel. And we get a nice good seal of the tape to the device. That way when we go to pull away the backing, we don't get any ripples or ridges. And we get a nice good adhesion to the new piece of glass. Alright, we're going to go ahead and lay this down across the top. We're just going to use the same size adhesive all the way across. Now the corners kind of have a funky shape, so we're going to try to mix and match some adhesive into here to give it exactly what we're looking for. We'll go down the opposite side. Want to make sure we get as close to the side of the device as possible. It seems like a lot of places where it starts to come up if you don't stick it down well is right here down the sides. So make sure you work hard to get this as perfect as possible in length. And make sure you don't overlap tape. That creates a ridge and it could possibly start to pull away from the device. My tape was starting to unravel there, so I just want to pull the backing off that little piece. Go ahead and lay tape down the bottom of the device. A little longer, just going to cut it to fit. All right. Just going to go across and make sure everything's adhered to the frame of the device. Now this was dinged a little bit when we took this out, so if you're using a new piece of glass, I like to kind of test fit it, make sure it's going to fit back in with any of the dings around the edges. If you need to, file down, cut, or pound out those bended edges. Going to pop up our battery here real fast. got a little bit of a funny acting displays sometimes if I don't if I connect them while the battery's still on or the device is still on. So I'm just gonna pull the battery off for safekeeping, and then we'll go ahead and attach our cables to the logic board. And again, make sure you line them up properly before you put a lot of pressure on them. You don't want to bend into the gold pins. That would basically ruin your device. You'd have to send it off to get soldering work done on the logic board, which is not a cheap process. Go ahead and reattach our battery. Just going to double check and make sure our display turns on real fast. Perfect, it does. I'm not going to go through the whole boot process with you. We just want to make sure that it's going to function properly before we start putting everything back into the device. Alright, so the next step is, you can see that I've reattached the shielding cable here. We're going to put our mid frame back in. Just make sure you don't forget to put in the shield on top of the ribbon cables that we took out with the 3 screws. We'll put our middle shield back in and put all the additional screws back in. It can be a little tricky to put this metal plate in. Just kind of bend it in the middle and then flatten it out when the screws go back in. We have a lot of screws to put back in. Just make sure you put them back in the right spot that you removed them from. These are very little, and they'll be kind of tricky to see. Just make sure you put them in straight and don't over tighten them if you're threading them the wrong way. You don't want to strip any of these screws out. Now this is one of the few times I thought about fast forwarding this video, since it's kind of tedious to put all these screws in. But again, I just want to make sure you guys understand how much effort goes into replacing this if you're going to go ahead and attempt to fix or replace your screen. Also, if you are replacing, I don't want anybody to get lost or have any questions that go unanswered in the middle of a replacement. So I won't fast forward it, and let's kind of suffer through. You can feel free to skip forward if you need to. Alright, we're getting close. Just a few more to go. Looks like this should be our last one. Alright, now with that being done, we can go ahead and flip over the display. I'm just going to press down on the corners, make sure all the screw holes are lined up. We can go ahead and insert the 4 screws that hold this down. It's just sitting up a little bit here on the back, so I'm just checking to make sure that everything's lined up and that there's nothing in the way. Looks like it was just a little bit of tape attached to it that was kind of holding everything in place. Alright, next step is to go put in the 4 screws, one in each corner that hold the display in place. It's being a little bit funky with the screw hole, so we'll give that one just a second and see if it's just not playing fair or what's happening at the moment. Try this one up here in the corner again. Tape down here is acting a little bit funky, so I'm just going to try to pull it into place. Don't want any ridges when we try to put the display on. So just trying to figure out what's happening in this upper corner here. My camera autofocus is getting a little crazy. I don't know what it's doing. Screw's acting like it's stripped out, so give me a few seconds while I try to figure out exactly what's happening here. Looks like it just wasn't going in straight, so I'm just going to use this tool to kind of push the screen together. So what I did is I just put a little piece of the magnet over it to hold it in place since the screw hole looks like it's stripped out. Whoever worked on this tablet before me definitely didn't do that great of a job. Put some adhesive over it to make sure it holds it in place. Once we put the glass down, everything will kind of fit back into where it needs to go. Just going to peel this little piece of this adhesive piece off the corner here and put some new adhesive down. Just cut it to fit. We'll put our adhesive on the opposite side as well. Just using the dental pick to make sure that all the corners are put down together. Everything's going to fit into place when we go to remove the adhesive. We're going to use our microfiber cloth and make sure we clean the LCD nicely before we go ahead and do too much more. We're just going to try to get all the fingerprint marks off, anything that might show up or give us a bad image underneath the display. Using some compressed air to blow the display off. We'll go ahead and continue with the microfiber cleaning cloth. Being diligent to make sure we clean all the corners. It seems like there's always fingerprints just right in the corners of the display. And it's important to take your time while you do this. You don't want anything to give you a bad looking display after you put all this effort into repairing it and fixing it. Again, just a little compressed air to clean any particles of dust off. Going to do the same thing to the glass to make sure there's no fingerprints, smudge marks on this side of the glass as well. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this. I don't want any particles of dust underneath. Still see a couple of smudges on here, so bear with me while I just clean this up and make sure everything looks really, really clean. I don't want any smudges or anything on here. Alright, with that being done, that little piece of dust here I can see once I lifted it up. Go ahead and peel off all the adhesive backing, being very careful not to touch the LCD now that we spent all that time cleaning it. Be very careful with the glass as well. You can see some smudges on there, but it's all on the opposite side. One little more tiny piece of tape here. With that being done, we can go ahead and put the glass on. We've tipped the bottom corners into place. Make sure that this is kind of the last chance you get to clean it before you put it on, so do the final touches. Check to see which side that smudge is on. Go ahead and tip it into place. Line the corners up. That should fit everything into place if the two bottom corners are lined up. Once you get it down in place, make sure all the corners fit in. And then work your way in towards the middle and the sides of the phone or the tablet. Perfect. And that is a battery replacement. Also, you could use this as a screen replacement, I guess, as well as an LCD replacement. You can see that the Apple logo turns on for us. Everything's functioning for us now. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to see any future videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe. And as always, if you have questions or comments, hit me up below and I'll do my best to answer them. Sorry about the excessive cleaning. I just wanted to make sure that this device looks perfect when I give it back to the person who I'm fixing it for. Again, thanks for watching the videos, and I appreciate your help.